What you are about to hear is a story that unfolded not in the pages of a novel, but under the glittering chandeliers of New York high society. It's a story about a tech millionaire, Nathaniel Sterling, a man who had everything, including a beautiful pregnant wife and a secret tucked away on his arm. On the most important night of his career, his mistress stood beside him, her smile as bright as the diamonds at her throat, believing her moment had finally come. But in a world where fortunes are built on perception, the most devastating truths are often revealed in the spotlight. In the echoing silence of a grand ballroom, one announcement was about to shatter 3 lives forever. This is what really happens when a web of lies is finally publicly torn apart. Nathaniel Sterling was a man forged in the crucible of ambition. At 38, he was the architect of Nexus Dynamics, a tech behemoth that had reshaped the landscape of digital communication. His face, a handsome collection of sharp angles and confident blue eyes, was a regular feature in Forbes and Wired. He moved through the world with an easy grace that belied the relentless drive churning beneath the surface. His life was a carefully curated masterpiece, and the jewel in his crown was his wife, Isabella Rossi. Isabella was not merely a beautiful accessory. An architectural historian with a degree from Columbia, she possessed a quiet intelligence and an old-world elegance that money couldn't buy. Her family, the Rossis, were not wealthy in the new money tech sense, but they were rich in culture and history, a lineage of Florentine artisans who had settled in Boston. Isabella had a warmth that could disarm the most cynical investor, and a spine of steel that had seen her through the grueling process of restoring several of New York's historical landmarks. Now, at 7 months pregnant, she was luminous. Their sprawling penthouse on the 75th floor of 157, with its panoramic views of Central Park, had become her sanctuary. The nursery, painted in a soft, muted sage, was nearly complete. A custom-made mobile of hand-carved wooden planets hung over a sleek, modern crib. It was in this room that their public facade felt most real. He kicked again. Isabella said one Tuesday evening, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. She was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights a glittering tapestry below. Nathaniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her and placing his hands over hers. Leo is letting us know he's ready for his board meeting. He kissed her temple, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. Did Dr. Albright say anything new today? Just that he's strong and perfectly on track. She wants me to take it easier, though. No more climbing scaffolding at the old library restoration. He chuckled, a sound she had always found comforting. I'll second that. My 2 most precious assets need to be kept safe. He gently turned her to face him, his gaze earnest. The Metamorphosis Gala is next Friday. It's a big night for me for the company. They're giving me the Visionary of the Year award. I need you there, Izzy. Shining. I wouldn't miss it for the world, she promised, melting into his embrace. The gala was the social event of the season, a fundraiser for the New York Arts and Culture Foundation. For Nathaniel, it was more than an award. It was an anointing, a confirmation of his place among the city's elite. For Isabella, it was a chance to celebrate the man she loved, the father of her child. Yet even in the warmth of his arms, a tiny cold sliver of unease had begun to wedge itself into her heart in recent months. It was nothing she could name, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The late-night server emergencies had become more frequent. The scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, faint and floral that she'd once noticed on his jacket, which he'd quickly explained away as a hug from a female colleague at a conference. He had become more protective of his phone, angling it away from her instinctively. She'd dismissed it as pregnancy-induced anxiety. What man on the cusp of fatherhood with a wife he adored would risk everything? It was illogical. So she pushed the doubts down, labeling them as hormonal insecurities. She focused on the tangible proofs of his love, the tenderness in his eyes when he looked at her stomach, the way he'd surprise her with takeout from her favorite Italian place, the shared dream that was growing in the room down the hall. One evening, while looking for a book in his office, she stumbled upon a small velvet jeweler's box from Cartier tucked away in the back of his desk drawer. It wasn't her birthday or their anniversary. Her heart gave a little flutter of excitement. He was always one for grand, surprising gestures. She resisted the urge to open it, wanting to preserve the surprise. She imagined a delicate pair of diamond earrings to match the necklace he'd given her when they found out she was pregnant. A push present, perhaps. Smiling to herself, she closed the drawer, the box, a small secret promise of his devotion. The gilded cage was beautiful, and from the inside, its bars were almost invisible. Chloe Dubois operated in the currency of perception. As a senior partner at a boutique PR firm, her job was to build narratives, to sculpt the public images of the powerful into something unbreakable. She was sharp, ambitious, and stunning in a way that was thoroughly modern, all sleek lines, a razor-sharp bob, and eyes that missed nothing. She met Nathaniel Sterling at a tech summit in Davos. He was the keynote speaker. She was managing crisis communications for a rival company. Their initial connection was professional, a meeting of two formidable minds. They spoke the same language of market shares, strategic optics, and ruthless efficiency. That professional respect soon bled into something more personal. Dinners to discuss industry trends at hushed expensive restaurants like Per Se became their ritual. Nathaniel was captivated by her. Unlike Isabella, whose world was one of history and art, Chloe understood his battlefield. She didn't just admire his success. She understood the mechanics of it, the sacrifices, and the cunning it required. Their affair began 6 months ago, a clandestine whirlwind of stolen afternoons at the Baccarat Hotel and late-night calls disguised as work. For Chloe, it wasn't a sordid little secret. It was an investment. Nathaniel fed her a narrative she was all too willing to believe. Isabella and we're more like business partners now, he told her one evening, swirling the amber liquid in his whiskey glass. They were in his private suite, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. The marriage was something we both needed at the time. It solidified my image. She's a wonderful woman, but she doesn't get it. Not like you do. She's from a different world. He told her about the pregnancy with a performance of weary resignation. It was an accident. The timing is terrible. Of course, I'll support her and the child always. But my future, I see that with you, Chloe. Chloe, a master strategist in her own right, believed she was playing the long game. She saw herself not as a mistress, but as the inevitable successor. She was patient, understanding, and played her role to perfection. She never made demands. She was the exciting, intelligent escape from his staid domestic life. She was the future. Isabella was the past. The lie that cemented her conviction was a masterpiece of cruelty. One afternoon, he took her to an exclusive by-appointment-only jeweler, a private showroom run by a man named Jean-Luc. "I need your eye for something," Nathaniel said, his tone serious. On a black velvet tray, Jean-Luc laid out several magnificent diamond necklaces. Chloe's breath caught. One in particular, a stunning piece with a cascade of brilliant cut diamonds, culminating in a flawless 10-carat pear-shaped drop, was exquisite. That one, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's bold, modern, perfect. Nathaniel smiled. I agree. He turned to the jeweler. We'll take it. Later, back in the car, Chloe was buzzing. For me, she asked, a hopeful tremor in her voice. Nathaniel took her hand. Chloe, I can't give this to you. Not yet. Giving you a piece like this now would raise too many questions. I bought this. For her. He saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes and pressed on his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Think of it as a prototype, a dress rehearsal. The real one, the one I give you when we're finally together, will make this look like a trinket. This is just part of the exit strategy. I have to keep her happy, unsuspecting until the time is right. After the baby is born, after the gala. That's when I make my move. Can you trust me? And she did. She saw the logic in it, the cold, strategic brilliance she so admired in him. She saw the necklace not as a gift for his wife, but as a promise to her. The Cartier box Isabella had found in his desk. It didn't hold earrings. It held that very necklace, a prototype of a promise. As the date of the Metamorphosis gala approached, Chloe's excitement grew. Nathaniel had secured her a seat at his table. I want you there, he'd said. It's my night, which means it's our night. It's time people started seeing you in my circle. She interpreted this as the beginning of the soft launch of their relationship. She commissioned a custom gown from a rising designer, a sheath of emerald green silk that clung to her body like a second skin. It was a statement. It was the color of money and envy. On the night of the gala, as her stylist put the finishing touches on her hair and makeup, Chloe looked at her reflection in the mirror. She didn't see a woman on the sidelines. She saw the next Mrs. Sterling. The game was almost over, and she was certain she was about to be declared the winner. The New York Public Library's Astor Hall was transformed. Towering floral arrangements of white orchids and delphiniums reached towards the marble arches, their scent mingling with the expensive perfumes of the city's elite. A string quartet played softly as guests in bespoke tuxedos and couture gowns moved through the room, their laughter echoing in the vast space. This was the Metamorphosis Gala, and tonight the air was electric with power, money, and ambition. Isabella felt a sense of calm as she made her final preparations in their penthouse. Her custom Valentino gown, a flowing creation of midnight blue silk, was designed to both accommodate and celebrate her pregnancy. It cascaded over her form, making her look regal, ethereal. Around her neck, she wore the prototype, the breathtaking Cartier diamond necklace. It felt heavy, a beautiful cold weight against her skin. Nathaniel had presented it to her that afternoon with a flourish. For my queen, he had said, fastening the clasp. So that everyone in that room knows who you are. She had teared up, her earlier anxieties melting away under the brilliance of the diamonds and the warmth of his words. He was right. Her doubts were foolish. When they arrived, they were met with a fusillade of flashbulbs. Nathaniel, impeccable, in a Tom Ford tuxedo, guided her down the red carpet, one hand placed protectively on the small of her back. They were the picture of devotion and success. He smiled for the cameras, a king in his court, his pregnant queen by his side. Inside, they made their way to the Sterling Industries table, the most prominent in the room, situated directly in front of the stage. A few executives and their spouses were already seated. and then Isabella saw her. A woman in a striking emerald green dress was speaking with one of Nathaniel's board members. She was sharp and impossibly chic, exuding a confidence that bordered on arrogance. When she turned, her eyes met Isabella's for a fleeting second. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, assessment triumph, pity before it was gone. "Nathaniel." "Who is that?" Isabella asked quietly, her hand instinctively going to her belly. Nathaniel didn't miss a beat. "That's Chloe Dubois. She runs the PR firm we've been consulting with for the European expansion. Incredibly sharp. I thought it would be good for her to be here to see the philanthropic side of the company." His voice was smooth as silk, a perfectly plausible explanation. He led Isabella to her seat, then went tall to greet Chloe. From across the table, Isabella watched the exchange. It was brief, professional, yet something about it felt practiced. Chloe's smile was brilliant, her eyes fixed on Nathaniel with an intensity that felt more personal than professional. When Nathaniel returned to his seat beside Isabella, he casually placed Chloe on his other side. The seating arrangement felt deliberate, a subtle but clear statement of proximity and importance. The dinner began a blur of polite conversation, exquisite food, and clinking glasses. Isabella felt a strange sense of dislocation, as if she were watching a play. She saw the small, almost imperceptible interactions between her husband and the woman in green. A shared glance when a speaker made a joke. Chloe leaning in to whisper something in his ear, his brief nod of agreement. They were small moments, easily deniable, but together they formed a pattern, a silent language that excluded her. Chloe, for her part, felt triumphant. She was here at the head table, seated next to the man of the hour. His wife was on the other side, beautiful but in Chloe's eyes a relic, a temporary obstacle. She saw the gazes from other tables, the curious whispers. "Who is she?" they were asking. Chloe drank her champagne, the bubbles fizzing with the promise of her imminent arrival. She caught sight of the diamond necklace on Isabella and smiled to herself. The prototype, a placeholder for the real thing. As the main course was cleared, the lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies, a veteran news anchor named James Covington, walked to the podium. The moment was approaching. "Ladies and gentlemen," Covington's voice boomed. "It is my great honor to present this year's Visionary of the Year award to a man whose innovation has not only transformed an industry, but has also become a powerful force for global connection. The CEO of Nexus Dynamics, Mr. Nathaniel Sterling." The room erupted in applause. Nathaniel stood, straightened his tie, and gave Isabella's hand a squeeze. "Wish me luck," he whispered. He then turned to Chloe, his hand briefly, almost imperceptibly, brushing her back as he passed. It was a gesture of inclusion, a signal. Our night. Chloe's smile widened. She watched him walk to the stage, her heart pounding with anticipation. The speech was just the beginning. The rest of the night, the rest of her life was about to start. Isabella watched him too, a proud smile fixed on her face, hiding the knot of dread that was now tightening in her stomach. The stage was set, the audience was rapt, and the carefully constructed facade of the Sterling Empire was about to face its ultimate test. The spotlight found Nathaniel as he reached the podium. He basked in the applause, a portrait of success and charisma. He placed his hands on the lectern, his gaze sweeping across the sea of influential faces until it settled on his table. His eyes met Chloe's for a charged second, a silent acknowledgement, before flicking to Isabella, offering her a tender public smile. "Thank you, James." He began, his voice resonating with practiced confidence. To be recognized by the Arts and Culture Foundation is a profound honor. We at Nexus Dynamics believe that technology and art are not opposing forces, but two sides of the same coin. Both are about forging human connection, about telling our stories. He spoke for 10 minutes, delivering a flawless speech about innovation, philanthropy, and the future. It was a masterclass in corporate rhetoric, weaving personal anecdotes with ambitious projections. As he neared his conclusion, he gestured vaguely towards his table. None of this would be possible without an incredible support system, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The people who believe in the vision, who work tirelessly behind the scenes, and who inspire me to be better every single day. From her seat, Chloe felt a thrill course through her. This was it. While he couldn't name her the gesture, the words were for her. She was the one who understood the vision, who worked with him on strategy. She straightened her back, her smile radiant, ready for the moment. She allowed her hand to rest on the table, just inches from the empty chair he would soon return to. She subtly angled her body towards him, a non-verbal cue of their connection for all the keen-eyed society watchers to note. Nathaniel finished his speech to another round of thunderous applause. He accepted the heavy crystal award, holding it aloft for the photographers. As he stepped away from the podium, instead of returning directly to his seat, he paused, remaining on the stage next to James Covington. A murmur of confusion rippled through the audience. Chloe's smile remained painted on her face, but a flicker of uncertainty entered her eyes. This wasn't part of the plan she'd imagined. James Covington stepped back to the microphone, a broad smile on his face. "Thank you, Nathaniel, for those inspiring words. And while we are celebrating visionaries tonight, the Foundation Board has decided to add a special unannounced honor to this evening's program." The room grew quiet. The air crackled with anticipation. Nathaniel stood by, looking proud and magnanimous, as if he were in on the surprise. Often the most profound work is done not in the boardroom, but in the quiet, painstaking effort to preserve the soul of our city. Covington continued. "Tonight we wish to honor a person whose dedication to architectural heritage and tireless pro bono work with the Metropolitan Heritage Foundation has saved 3 of this city's historic landmarks from demolition this year alone. A true guardian of our culture and our history." A spotlight operator, clearly pre-briefed, swung a second beam away from the stage and out into the audience. It swept across the tables, a beacon searching for its target. Chloe's heart hammered in her chest. For a wild, illogical moment, she wondered if this was somehow for her a PR coup orchestrated by Nathaniel to honor her work. But the words architectural heritage shattered the fantasy. The spotlight came to rest directly on table 1, illuminating one person in its brilliant, unforgiving glare: Isabella Rossi. She blinked momentarily, blinded her expression one of genuine, unfeigned shock. The baby gave a sudden, powerful kick, as if reacting to the energy in the room. Covington's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is our distinct privilege to name as this year's surprise guest of honor and recipient of the Foundation's Heritage Medallion, Mrs. Isabella Rossi Sterling." For a full 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Not polite silence, but a thick, heavy vacuum of shock. The clinking of cutlery stopped. The whispers ceased. In that deafening void, the only sound was the frantic, synchronized clicking of 24 cameras turning away from the celebrated CEO on stage and focusing on his pregnant wife. On stage, Nathaniel's practiced smile wavered a barely perceptible crack in the marble facade. This was not his plan. He had been blindsided. But it was Chloe's reaction that was the most telling. Her radiant, triumphant smile didn't just fade. It froze, then shattered. The color drained from her face, leaving a sickly pale mask of disbelief. The emerald of her dress suddenly looked garish, her posture of poised victory, now one of rigid humiliation. All her carefully constructed beliefs, the promises, the prototype necklace, the soft launch of her new life, crumbled to dust in that single public moment. She was not the co-star of the evening. She was not even a supporting character. She was an unnamed extra, and the spotlight had just made it brutally, devastatingly clear. Across the table, Isabella, recovering from her initial shock, slowly rose to her feet. The entire room was watching her. She placed a hand on her belly, a gesture of both protection and strength. The Cartier necklace, the supposed prototype, flashed under the lights, no longer a symbol of her husband's affection, but a crown of her own incredible achievement. Her eyes met Nathaniel's across the distance, and for the first time she saw not a loving husband, but a stranger caught in a trap of his own making. The silence finally broke, not with a trickle, but a flood of applause warmer and more genuine than what Nathaniel had received. As Isabella began her graceful, deliberate walk toward the stage, Chloe Dubois remained seated in the glare of the ambient light, utterly, completely alone. The mistress had smiled beside the millionaire, but the silence that fell for his wife was the sound of her world ending. The applause for Isabella was a tidal wave washing over the wreckage of Chloe's ambitions. Isabella accepted the medallion with a quiet grace that captivated the room. Her impromptu acceptance speech was brief, heartfelt, and brilliant. She spoke of the stories buildings tell, of the importance of preserving the past for the future. A future she gestured to by resting a hand on her pregnant belly. She thanked the foundation, and with a cool, level gaze directed at her husband, still standing awkwardly on stage, she added, "And I thank my husband Nathaniel for his support." The slight hesitation in her voice was a masterpiece of subtext. A single perfectly placed crack in the veneer of their perfect marriage, audible only to those now paying very close attention. The moment the formalities concluded, the gala descended into a maelstrom of gossip. Nathaniel, his face a thunderous mask of fury, beneath a forced smile, quickly escorted Isabella from the stage, murmuring excuses about her needing to rest. But before they could escape, he turned to one of his security men. "Find Chloe Dubois. Bring her to the loading bay entrance. Now!" The loading bay of the New York Public Library was a stark, cold contrast to the opulence inside. Concrete floors, humming generators, and the smell of diesel fumes filled the air. Chloe was waiting there, her arms wrapped around herself, the emerald silk of her gown looking forlorn under the harsh fluorescent lights. The triumphant queen had become a ghost. When Nathaniel stormed in, his tie loosened and his jacket off the mask was gone completely. His face was contorted with rage. "What the hell was that?" he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Chloe stared at him, her own shock giving way to a burning, desperate anger. "What was that?" "You're asking me." "I was humiliated, Nathaniel. In front of everyone. Your wife, the guest of honor. Was this some kind of sick game? A game?" He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed off the concrete. "You think I planned that? Do you have any idea the position you've put me in? Her up on that stage looking like a saint while you're sitting at my table looking like what you are." The cruelty of the words struck Chloe like a physical blow. "What I am," I am the woman you have been promising a future to for 6 months. The woman you told me you loved. The woman you said you were going to leave your wife for. I told you what you needed to hear." He shot back, taking a step closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I told you I was building an exit strategy, and you, a PR guru, you actually believed it. The wife is always the last to go in the playbook, Chloe, especially a pregnant one with a sterling reputation. You were a thrill, an asset. You were useful, but you were never ever going to be the next Mrs. Sterling. That was a fantasy you wrote for yourself. The prototype lie. The promises, the shared glances. It all replayed in her mind, now tinted with the sickening colors of manipulation. The necklace wasn't a promise. It was a leash. The seat at the table wasn't an introduction. It was a prop. "You used me," she whispered, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a hollow, cavernous emptiness. "Of course I used you," he said, his voice flat and cold. "We used each other. You got access, proximity to power. You thought you could leverage it into a marriage. You made a bad bet. It's over. Go home, Chloe. You're becoming a liability." He turned to leave, dismissing her as easily as he would a failed business venture. That final, callous dismissal ignited one last spark of defiance in her. "I have emails, Nathaniel," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "Texts. I have hotel receipts. I can destroy you." He stopped and turned back slowly, a look of genuine pity laced with contempt on his face. "You do that, and I'll release the file my private investigator has on you, the affair you had with a married senator to get your first big client, the confidential information from your old firm you used to poach accounts. Your reputation is your only currency, Chloe. Mine is built on a billion-dollar algorithm. Whose do you think will survive? Now get out of my sight." He walked away without a backward glance, leaving her shivering in the cold industrial silence. Meanwhile, in the black Lincoln SUV speeding away from the gala, an entirely different kind of confrontation was taking place. It was quiet, devoid of shouting. Isabella sat staring out the window, her hand resting on the heavy heritage medallion in her lap. She hadn't said a word since they'd left. I had no idea the Foundation was planning that Izzy Nathaniel began trying to reclaim control. It was a complete surprise. She turned her head slowly to look at him. Her eyes, usually so warm, were like chips of ice. Was she a surprise too? "Chloe, I told you she's a consultant. It was a business decision to have her there." "Stop lying, Nathaniel," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "Just for a moment. Stop. I saw the way you looked at her, the way she looked at you, the way you put her next to you. How long has it been going on?" He faltered, the ease of his lies failing him in the face of her direct, cold fury. "It's not what you think. I think," she said, her voice precise and sharp as broken glass, "that my husband brought his mistress to a gala where he was being honored and sat her at our table right next to him. And the only thing that saved me from being the most pitied woman in New York tonight was an award I didn't even know I was receiving. I think you are a fool, and you have made a fool of me." He reached for her hand. "Izzy, please, we can fix this." It meant nothing. She pulled her hand away, as if his touch had burned her. She looked down at the glittering necklace still around her neck. And this? What did this mean? Another part of the performance. She didn't wait for an answer. She simply turned back to the window, the silence in the car more damning than any accusation. He hadn't just broken her heart, he had insulted her intelligence. And as the car sped through the sleeping city, the initial shock and pain within Isabella began to cool, hardening into something else entirely resolve. He thought she was a fragile piece of art to be preserved. He was about to discover she was the architect of her own life, and she was more than capable of drawing up new plans. The following Monday morning was unnaturally bright, the sun streaming through the panoramic windows of the penthouse conference room and glinting off the polished mahogany of the long table. The room, usually Nathaniel's inner sanctum, a place of triumphant acquisitions and ruthless negotiations, was silent. It had been scrubbed of his presence, the air still and expectant. At the head of the table sat Isabella. She had not slept, but she was not tired. The shock and grief from the gala had burned away through the long hours of the weekend, leaving behind a core of pure, cold clarity. She was dressed in a charcoal grey dress by the row, a garment that was less about fashion and more about armor. Its severe, clean lines broadcasted a message of untouchable resolve. Her hair was pulled back in an immaculate chignon at the nape of her neck, not a single strand out of place. Before her sat a single glass of water untouched and a slim leather folio. Every so often she would place a hand on her belly, not for reassurance, but as a silent, visceral reminder of her objective. This was not for her. This was for Leo. A few minutes before 9, she was joined by Catherine Prescott. The woman moved with an economy of motion that spoke of immense confidence. She placed her own identical folio on the table, its corner perfectly aligned with the edge. She gave Isabella a brief appraising nod. "Are you ready?" Catherine asked, her voice low and even. "I am." Isabella replied, her own voice betraying no tremor. She had already shed all her tears. What was left was purpose. At precisely 9 o'clock, Nathaniel entered. He had dressed with care in a bespoke Zegna suit, an attempt to project the authority he felt slipping from his grasp. He had spent a miserable weekend, locked out of his own life. His calls unanswered, his apologies lost to the digital ether. He saw Isabella at the head of his table and felt a flicker of hope. She was here. She was willing to talk. He could fix this. He was Nathaniel Sterling. He could fix anything. His optimism evaporated the moment he saw the second woman. He didn't know her personally, but he knew the face from a dozen magazine profiles. Catherine Prescott, the scourge of Wall Street divorces. A cold dread, colder than any market crash, began to seep into his bones. This was not a conversation. It was an ambush. "Isabella." He started, his voice a strained attempt at warmth. "I'm glad you were willing to see me." "Nathaniel." "Thank you for joining us," Isabella said, her tone devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of a CEO addressing a subordinate. "This is Catherine Prescott. I retained her services yesterday. I'm sure you're familiar with her work." He nodded stiffly, his eyes darting between his wife and the lawyer. The power dynamic in his own home had fundamentally, terrifyingly shifted. "Isn't this a bit premature? We haven't even had a chance to talk this through." "We're talking now," Isabella stated, gesturing to the chair opposite her. It was the seat usually reserved for his adversaries. Or rather, Catherine will be doing most of the talking. "Please sit." He sat the plush leather of the chair, feeling alien and unwelcoming. Catherine Prescott opened her folio. The sound of the crisp paper turning, seeming unnaturally loud in the silent room. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice a clinical instrument. Let's dispense with the pretense of a marital discussion. This is a legal negotiation concerning the dissolution of your marriage and the subsequent division of assets. My client is filing for divorce on the grounds of irrefutable adultery. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Given the very public stage you chose for your indiscretion at the Metamorphosis Gala, this is not a claim we will have any trouble proving. The society pages are already burning with speculation. My phone and the phones of my associates have been ringing with requests for comment from every major news outlet since Saturday morning. We have thus far maintained a professional and dignified silence. Whether we continue to do so depends entirely on the outcome of this meeting. It was blackmail delivered with the serene poise of a university lecture. Nathaniel felt a surge of impotent anger. He turned to his wife, trying to find a crack in her composure. "Isabella, what is it you want?" he asked, his voice tight with frustration. "My apologies. You have them. Money. Name a number." Isabella leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes locking onto his. For the first time, he saw not the warm, loving woman he had married, but a stranger forged in the fire of his betrayal. "What I want, Nathaniel, is what I have earned. I want what my son is owed, and I want to be utterly and completely free of you." Catherine took her cue, her voice slicing back into the conversation. "To that end, here are our terms. Let me be clear. They are non-negotiable. First, the immediate and uncontested dissolution of the marriage. A comprehensive non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement will be signed by both parties. However, be assured if any part of our final agreement is breached, or if you refuse these terms, the full detailed story of your affair with Ms. Chloe Dubois, complete with a verified timeline, hotel receipts, and copies of electronic correspondence. My team has already begun to assemble, will be given as a formal exclusive to the New York Times. Their investigative unit is particularly interested in stories about the moral character of tech billionaires right now. She slid a document across the table. Second, the assets. Your prenuptial agreement, which we have reviewed, is frankly insulting and predicated on a foundation of good faith, which you have spectacularly breached. We are fully prepared to contest it in open court, citing significant material misrepresentations and a gross breach of your fiduciary duty to the marital partnership. However, my client is aware that a protracted and very public court battle would be catastrophic for Nexus Dynamics' stock price, especially in the sensitive weeks leading up to your European launch. To avoid that, she is prepared to offer you a more surgical solution. Nathaniel stared at her, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was a hostage situation. My client will not seek a 50% share of Nexus Dynamics, a figure she would almost certainly be awarded. Catherine continued the implication hanging in the air. Instead, she requires the following. 1. The 157. Penthouse. The deed is to be transferred to her name, free and clear of all encumbrances within 30 days. 2. The complete endowment and operational control of the Sterling Family Foundation. It will be renamed the Rossi Foundation and will require a one-time, irrevocable capital injection of $200 million to fund its future work. And 3. She paused for effect. A 20% stake in Helios, your nascent satellite imaging subsidiary. That stake is to be placed in an irrevocable trust for your son, Leo Rossi Sterling. My client will act as the sole trustee and voting member of the board on his behalf until his 25th birthday. The air left Nathaniel's lungs in a rush. It was a stunningly audacious, brutally strategic attack. She wasn't just taking his home and a chunk of his cash. The foundation was his claim to legitimacy, his philanthropic legacy. And Helios was his secret weapon, his next billion-dollar venture. Giving her a voting stake in it was unthinkable. It was giving her a permanent seat at his future table. "This is insane," he breathed, shaking his head. "Completely insane." "Is it?" Isabella's voice cut through his disbelief, sharp and clear. "Let's talk about what's insane, Nathaniel. Insane is bringing your mistress to a public event and seating her next to your pregnant wife. Insane is thinking that I, the woman who helped you edit your business plans and charm your first investors, wouldn't understand the value of your assets. You didn't just build a company, you built a brand. The Nathaniel Sterling brand. It's based on an image of stability, of forward-thinking family values, of trustworthiness. An image I helped you craft and polish for a decade." She stood up, walking slowly to the window and looking out over the city that had been her home, his kingdom. "A messy public divorce, sordid stories of you cheating on your pregnant wife for months. What do you think that does to shareholder confidence, to the morale of your board? You sell an algorithm that predicts and builds digital trust, Nathaniel. You are about to become the global face of betrayal." Catherine's offer isn't insane. It's a bargain. It's the price to save what's left of your reputation. He looked at her silhouetted against the morning sky and finally understood. He had mistaken her quiet nature for passivity, her grace for weakness. He had thought she was a beautiful piece of art he owned and curated. He now realized she was the architect of the museum, and she was calmly explaining the terms under which she would leave him with the building while she walked away with the most priceless masterpieces. Catherine Prescott slid a pen across the polished table. It came to a stop directly in front of him. "You have 24 hours to have your counsel review this and sign." The lawyer said, her voice final. "After that, our period of dignified silence concludes, and I will be holding a press conference. I suggest you think carefully, Mr. Sterling. Think about what you have to lose." Isabella turned back from the window, her expression unreadable. "My client, Catherine," continued, "on the other hand, has already lost the one thing she thought was priceless. She has absolutely nothing left to fear." With that, Catherine closed her folio with a soft, definitive snap. Isabella walked past the table without a single glance in his direction and left the room. The two women departed, leaving Nathaniel Sterling alone in the silent, sunlit monument. To his power, a pen lying before him like a dagger, and a contract that represented the bill for his arrogance finally coming due. 6 months later, the New York autumn had arrived, a brisk, cleansing wind sweeping through the city's canyons. It carried the scent of change, a feeling that was deeply familiar to the woman who now looked out over Central Park from the 75th floor of 157. The penthouse was no longer a gilded cage. It was a sanctuary, a home. The cold, minimalist aesthetic favored by Nathaniel had been systematically erased, replaced by a warmth that was entirely Isabella's. Plush rugs with intricate patterns now covered the cold marble floors. Shelves overflowed with books on history and art, not corporate biographies. And in the corner of the vast living room, where a severe-looking sculpture once stood, was a beautifully crafted playpen filled with soft educational toys. The transformation was most evident in Nathaniel's former office. Once a stark chamber of glass and steel, designed for intimidation, it was now a sun-drenched playroom. The mahogany conference table where Isabella had dismantled her husband's life had been donated to a charity auction. In its place, a soft sage-green carpet covered the floor, and the walls were adorned with whimsical hand-painted murals of historical buildings from around the world. Isabella Rossi sat in a comfortable armchair, rocking her 2-month-old son Leo. He was a perfect tiny fusion of her and the man who was now a stranger to them both. He had her dark, curious eyes, but the stubborn set of his father's jaw. As she hummed a soft Italian lullaby, her laptop sat open on a nearby ottoman, the screen showing the final architectural renderings for a new project. Her life now existed in this beautiful duality, the profound, all-consuming love for her child, and the sharp, focused ambition of her new role. A chime from the laptop signaled the start of her video call. She adjusted the camera, and the faces of the Rossi Foundation's board of directors appeared in a neat grid. They were a formidable group of city planners, philanthropists, and academics she had personally selected. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice clear and confident. Leo stirred in her arms, and she gently soothed him without breaking her gaze from the screen. As you can see in the updated plans from KPF, the structural reinforcement of the old Bronx schoolhouse is complete. We are on schedule to begin the interior work next month. I want to focus today on the community outreach program. She led the meeting with an effortless authority that was now second nature to her. She was no longer just a historian with a passion. She was the decisive head of a $200 million foundation, a force in the city's cultural landscape. The board respected her not because of her famous last name, which she had legally shed, but because of her vision and her meticulous attention to detail. She was building something real, something that would outlast headlines and stock prices. She was restoring a foundation for a community while cementing her own. For Nathaniel Sterling, foundations had become a treacherous concept. He existed now in a state of gilded isolation. He hadn't returned to the penthouse since the day he signed the divorce settlement. His new residence was a sprawling, minimalist apartment in a new development downtown. It was impeccably furnished by a high-end designer, but it felt like a luxury hotel suite, a transient space devoid of personality or memory. His evenings were largely the same. He would stand before a massive screen in his living area, not watching a film, but a complex array of live financial data. On one side, the Nexus Dynamics stock ticker crawled sluggishly across the screen. It was down 7% for the quarter. The European launch had been a moderate success, but it had lacked the explosive growth the market had expected. The whispers that had started after the gala had solidified into a persistent narrative. Nathaniel Sterling had lost his Midas touch. His judgment was questioned in quiet boardroom meetings and in the pages of the Wall Street Journal. He had survived, but he was diminished. On the other side of the screen was a smaller private window showing the valuation for the Helios subsidiary. Its stock since its private IPO was up over 300%. Its technology was revolutionary, and it was poised to dominate the market for the next decade. Every upward tick was a fresh stab of humiliation. It was a constant, glaring reminder of the price of his arrogance, a monument to the son he barely knew, and the wife who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. That 20% stake, which had seemed like a calculated loss at the time, now felt like a strategic masterpiece of his own destruction. It was Isabella, a ghost on his cap table, silently and effortlessly siphoning away his future. His phone rang, dragging him from his bitter reverie. It was his new head of public relations. "Nathaniel," the voice said, sounding weary. "The profile in Vanity Fair is going to press. We managed to kill the section about Ms. Dubois, but they're still framing the divorce as a re-evaluation of priorities on Mrs. Ross's part. The narrative is that she outgrew you, that she's the one with the real vision now. The Rossi Foundation is a charity, not a tech company. Nathaniel snapped. Spin it that way. I'm focused on building the future, she's focused on preserving the past. We're trying, but she has all the goodwill, Nathaniel. She's the Madonna with a child and a cause. You're just the guy who paid for it. We need a win, a new product, a big acquisition, something to change the story. But Nathaniel had nothing. His focus was fractured, his confidence eroded. The relentless drive that had built his empire was now consumed by a quiet, simmering rage. He had won every battle in his career, but had lost the only war that mattered, the one waged in the silent conference room of his own home. As for the other player in that war, Chloe Dubois had become a ghost. Her downfall was as swift and silent as her ambitions had been loud and glittering. One of her former colleagues, a junior associate named Emily, spotted her one rainy afternoon in Chicago. Chloe was huddled under the awning of a pharmacy, trying to hail a cab. The razor-sharp bob had grown out into an unflattering shoulder-length style. The bespoke power suits were gone, replaced by a generic trench coat. The fire in her eyes, the fierce intelligence that had so captivated Nathaniel, had been extinguished, replaced by a look of perpetual low-grade anxiety. Emily almost walked past, but a pang of pity made her stop. Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide, with the panicked look of someone who didn't want to be recognized. Emily. Hello. Her voice was thin, reedy. How are you, Emily? Asked, the awkwardness thick between them. I'm fine. Good. Working in marketing for a pharmaceutical company. It's stable, Chloe said the word stable, sounding like a death sentence from a woman who had once thrived on risk. I have to go. Before Emily could say another word, Chloe darted into a taxi, disappearing into the grey, anonymous Chicago traffic. She wasn't a cautionary tale anymore. She was simply gone, a footnote in a story that had moved on, a stark example of what happened when you tied your entire worth to a man who saw people as assets to be leveraged and eventually liquidated. Back in New York, as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the city, Isabella stood by the window, Leo sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. She looked down at the park, at the old, enduring architecture of the Plaza Hotel, at the new, gleaming towers that pierced the sky. She thought of the woman she had been a year ago, a woman who had believed her happiness was a shared construction co-authored by her husband. She realized now that he had only ever seen her as a beautiful facade for the building he was constructing for himself. The gala, the betrayal, the pain. It had not been the end. It had been a demolition, a violent, necessary clearing of a condemned structure built on a faulty foundation of lies. It had hurt, but it had also, for the first time, given her a clear, unobstructed view. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. It wasn't a smile of revenge or triumph. It was deeper than that. It was the quiet, contented smile of an architect, looking upon her own design, a structure built not of glass and steel, but of resilient love and a profound sense of self. She had everything she needed right here in her arms and in the strength she had discovered within herself. She was the architect now, and what she was building was meant to last forever. And so the story of Nathaniel, Isabella, and Chloe comes to a close. It's a powerful reminder that in life the brightest spotlights often cast the darkest shadows, and true strength isn't about holding on to a perfect image, but about having the courage to rebuild when that image is shattered. Isabella's journey from a trusting wife to a formidable architect of her own destiny shows us that betrayal doesn't have to be an end. It can be a violent, painful, but ultimately powerful beginning. She didn't just survive, she rewrote the entire script. What did you think of Isabella's final move? Was it justice or was it a masterclass in revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who appreciates a story of strength and resilience, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true-life dramas that you won't want to miss. Thank you for listening.